This morning we're going to start with a little warm-up, and I'm just going to ask three little questions. And actually I gave all of you the answer to the questions at the preface of Mass. So I mentioned every one of these questions and its answer when I started Mass off this morning. So we'll just see how well you might have retained what I said, or if you listened to what I said. So let me ask you this. Today we celebrate the feast of Pentecost. That's good. Pentecost is the day that the Holy Spirit descended down upon what group? The apostles, getting a little softer. And the word Pentecost means what? You think that's correct? Okay, let's try that together. And it means 50. The word Pentecost means? We can do better. I'm giving you the answer. Okay, the word Pentecost means 50. Let's try that again. The word Pentecost means? Here you go. Now, in order to understand the Feast of Pentecost, we have to put Pentecost in its historical perspective. This was a feast, Pentecost, that existed literally centuries before Christianity. Now, the early Christians were both Jews and Gentiles, Greeks. They lived in an agrarian society. So as they moved from just being secular, non-religious, into Christianity, they brought with them this feast and this concept of Pentecost. You know, as farmers, they understood plant life, they understood plant growth. These early Christians realized that if you put a seed into the ground today, you're not going to be able to walk outside and pick what you planted the next day. You have to wait a period of time. Now, these early Christians, they would always plant their produce all on the same day. And they realized that for the most part, everything takes at least 50 days to mature. You're not going to get lettuce on day 25, day 30. You're not going to get radish on day 25, day 30. But once you get to the 50th day after planting, you can begin to get excited. Now, today I might be able to pick my produce. If not today, shortly thereafter. So 50 was extremely important to them. In the secular world, before they became Christian, they always had a huge celebration 50 days after the day of planting. Now, does that still hold true today? Well, the other day I went over to Stanford Lumber over there in Leechburg. I was told that they sell seeds over there, so I went over and I went inside of the store. And I quickly, because I didn't want to hang out in Stanford Lumber, people might think I'm going to be doing some work. So I quickly grabbed a packet of seeds and I paid for them and left. These are the seeds I picked right here. Okay, it's just a regular salad bowl, red lettuce, nothing big about that, but those are the seeds I purchased the other day. Now, what's really going to be important, we want to flip that packet of seeds and look at the backside. Now, just go to the right column, the stuff in the yellow, how deep you should plant the seed, the plant space, the row space, sprouts in 7 to 14 days. But what I want to show you is this. That packet of salad bowl red lettuce, you see it there? Matures in 50 days. Pentecost. So if I planted that lettuce, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to wait 50 days for lettuce. I'm going to go over to John Eagle and buy that lettuce that comes in the bags that has the carrots inside. They're buy one, get one free this week, so I'll go get that. I'm not going to wait 50 days for lettuce. But if I planted the seeds out of that packet, I would have to wait at least 50 days to pick the produce. You see, what's really important is this. For every mom and dad, for every grandmother, grandfather, for every teacher, you always have to remember there's always a lapse of time between the day you plant the seed and the day you pick the produce. Now, these early Christians, being familiar with farming and the celebration of Pentecost, 50 days after planting the produce, now we might be able to pick the product we planted. They firmly believed that it was on Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday of Jesus Christ, that was the day that the seed of the Holy Spirit was planted. And 50 days later, Pentecost simply means 50, that was the day the Holy Spirit descended down upon the apostles. But what's important for all of us, especially for parents, is to remember that you only reap what you sow. So if you want your son or daughter to have markers of goodness and kindness and compassion, you plant those seeds in their soul and in their heart and in their lives. Now, if you plant that seed, you nourish the seed, you water the seed, you fertilize the seed, and eventually that seed matures as your son or daughter matures. You'll be able to see the very product of that which you planted. And if you don't plant the right product, you'll not receive the right produce. And that's the way life works. We replicate what our parents teach us. And if you're fortunate enough and lucky enough to have good parents and they teach you the right things and they fertilize what they teach you, then eventually, and you might not express those attributes immediately after they're taught, but if they keep expressing those attributes, keep working on fertilizing those attributes in your heart, in your soul, eventually mom and dad will see the product of all their hard work. So when your son or daughter turns 18, 20, 25 years old and they do something stellar, they're generous and they're kind and they're compassionate, who gets the credit for all that? Naturally, the person who has all those attributes is going to receive credit. They're going to receive accolades, but the foundation of that credit rests where? With the instructors. The primary instructors of any child is mom and dad. Now, I remember when I was growing up, I was an altar boy. And I remember going down to the church, and my parents would drop me off. They would all walk in church together. They would sit in the pews, and I would go to the sacristy of the vest to be an altar server. And there was a server friend of mine that his dad always did something very interesting. I would be in church looking out the window waiting for Mass to get started. I'd see this car pull up, and I'd see the family get out of the car. Everyone would come into church. Dad would drop his family off, and one of his family members was an altar server, a friend of mine, his son. And then Dad would drive off and sit in a parking lot and sit in a car, wait for Mass to be over so he could take his family home. I thought to myself, I wonder why he doesn't come in. He would sit in a car. Fast forward about 35 years later. 35 years later, I'm saying Mass at this very church I was born and raised in, helping the priest out. I was available to say Mass for him this one Sunday. As I'm walking to the church so I could get inside to the vest for Mass, I see this car pull up, and I recognize the driver. The driver was my buddy, altar server, and we were young 35 years prior. And I noticed that when he pulled up in front of the church, the car doors opened, his family got out, and they all walked in church, and he drove off. And he sat in a car, and he waited for Mass to be over so he could take his family home. And I thought to myself, Pentecost. When you plant the seed, you're going to reap the product of that which you planted, be it good or be it bad. And I thought to myself, he did the only thing that he was taught. When he was a young boy, he was dropped off by his dad, and his dad stayed in the car and didn't join the family inside of the church. It made sense, although unfortunate, it made sense for him that he would do the exact same thing, because that is what he was taught. That's the seed that was planted in his heart. That was the seed that was nourished and fertilized, and when he grew up, he said to himself, that's the way it is. You drop your family off, you stay in the car. Or you go home or go to Mr. Donut and you come back to pick them up. You see, that's something to remember. Whatever you plant in your son or daughter, or don't plant, you'll pick or not pick the produce that was planted or not planted. Now, a lot of parents and a lot of teachers, sometimes they lose their patience. I've had teachers tell me we're in the classroom and they're trying to educate their students, and they say to me, I don't think they're getting it. They're looking at me, they're yawning, I could tell they're alive, but I don't think they get it. But guess what? If you keep repeating the same thing over and over again and nourishing and taking care of what you're teaching, they're hearing it, but it takes a while for that to mature. There's always a lapse of time between a day you plant the seed and you pick the produce. Mom and Dad, you don't have to be that patient. You just have to have understanding. Just keep planting the correct seed, fertilizing the proper seeds, the compassion, the seed of kindness, the seed of generosity. Nourish those seeds, fertilize those seeds, and guess what will happen? When your son or your daughter matures, you'll see kindness and generosity and compassion come out of their bodies. And you'll be able to say to yourself, it worked. I planted. I took the time to cultivate. I took the time to take care of the seed I planted in my son or daughter, and eventually it matured and showed me the right product. When your son or daughter makes you proud, who gets the credit for that? You do, mom and dad. When your son or daughter does something that does not make you proud, it's kind of embarrassing. Who ultimately might get the credit for that? You do, mom and dad. Because you have to reflect and say to yourself, did I teach them that? Were they watching my actions and my actions were wrong? Where did they learn that? It's kind of sad and unfortunate. And the source of learning for all of us, the primary source of learning, is in the home, not necessarily in the local school. The local school is only meant to fortify what you learn at home, to teach math and arithmetic, the things you might not get at home. But moral value, moral code, moral posture, right from wrong, that is taught at home first. It is not the job of the local school district to do it. They might have to pick up the pieces that aren't occurring home if Pentecost isn't happening in the house. Today is a beautiful feast that we celebrate. But we always have to remember this. For everything we plant in the ground, there's always a lapse of time between the day you plant and the day you pick the produce. It takes time for that to mature. If you want to see in your son or daughter when they grow up and when they mature, you want to see compassion, kindness, generosity, moral value, moral code, then that's what you need to plant now. Fertilize now. Nurture now, so that when they mature, it's going to take some time, but when they mature, they'll make you proud. When they make you proud, then we're all better off as a society.